animation. I asked him how you work in a very secular company and still maintain your Christian experience. His answer is enlightening. So, you said you were very intentional about keeping close to God. You attended church. A lady asked you a question. What was that?
Well, she asked me if I would take her class to lead in these Bible studies. And I was hesitant, but she ended up by telling me, she said, I believe this will be the salvation of your soul. And for her to say something like that to me, very sincerely, it just hit me back a little bit. And well, what is she saying? She's saying I ought to get into the Word that I can tell others about it. And I couldn't say no at that point. There's nothing in me that could make me say no. So I took her class little by little until she finally gave me the entire class. I ended up teaching every week, which means I had to be in the Word every week because I couldn't just stand up there and talk about. And when I got in the Word, it began to change me, which the Word does. So that was all God's plan, was in order to change me, to make my mind connected with His and see that He's worthwhile. That the things that I heard in the past, though I admired my parents and the way that they had walked, I had to experience it my own self in a real way. I had to get to know God myself.
So do you think she was right? Was it the saving of your soul?
I can't wait to meet her because she's since passed on, but I can't wait to meet her in heaven and embrace her with giving me that opportunity.
Can't help thinking a young guy in Southern California has got his dream job. It's the center of the universe in terms of creativity and animation. There's a lot that could have drawn you away or distracted you from faith in God. So speak to the person right now who is working in a secular environment, and that's most everybody who works, unless you work for a church. Working in a secular environment, what do you do? What do you think you need to do in order to preserve, not just maintain, but strengthen your faith in God while you work in this distracting environment?
3 things come to my mind really quickly is what I just mentioned is walk with God, be in His Word, get to know Him in His Word and listen to Him. The second one is pray and ask for the opportunities for when they come up. We would be sitting together as story artists and something would come up in a story that would be just biblical or spiritual in nature. And somebody would ask a question about it, and I found myself in a position to answer something regarding the Bible. Like somebody might say something regarding evolution, and then I could interject something about, well, did you think about it this way? Can it happen this way as well? So pray for those opportunities for where God opens up things for you.
And what's that third one?
It's when those moments happen where you see God leading, that you tuck those away in the back of your mind, so when He appears not to be there, you can remember them and say, I remember God led me here. I remember when He spoke through me in this occasion or that occasion. I remember how it touched this person's life here or there. And those re-inspire the inspiration that God is real, He's really there.
This is a narrow question and a broad question. Are there fields that young people should just not work in because of the content? Or are there some of these very secular fields, for instance, animation and these kinds of things today? Are they just too secular, or can people survive in those industries today?
I think with anything that you go into, you need to do it prayerfully. You need to ask if God would have you there, if He has a purpose for you being there. And then if you sense a desire is tugging you in that direction, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think God places that there for us as long as we put Him first and we're seeking His guidance in it. When you find yourself there, continue to pray and to ask for His guidance, because He will fulfill that purpose for bringing there. It is to influence, it's to touch other people in some way for Christ, whether it be with a word that helps them or that reminds them of things.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you what you see, if any, are the moral, ethical implications of working for a company like Disney. There are people who will analyze Disney's content and they say, well, that's not even Christian. The mouse is a wizard, in fact, and might look at some things that you find in there in storylines that they may appear to be directly opposed to the principles of the gospel or teachings of the Bible. So how did you have to reconcile that in your mind, or how did you go about that, or was it not a concern? Walk me through what you undoubtedly went through when you were considering your career.
There were concerns as to what some of the things I might work on, if they would trouble me in terms of contradicting my faith or my belief in things. So I did have to make a choice and a determination. If something like that ever comes up, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to just go ahead and work on it or not? I did have a couple occasions where I had to say, this troubles me or bothers me. I can't see myself doing this. And not knowing what the response was going to be. I know that on one project where I made that known, the director that I was talking to said, well, I'm not sure what to do with you then, because here we're in the middle of production and it's got to get done. And so I'm not sure. We'll have to go talk to the production manager or something. But I went and talked to the production manager and I found out that he himself was a Christian. And so I was fortunate in that regard that I was actually able to explain what it was that was troubling me. And he says, well, I understand. We're going to try to find something else for you. That to me, but again, in my mind, I was ready to say, okay, if they're going to say, sorry, you can't, then I'm out of a job. And that's okay. If this is the point where God is saying the doors are closed now, you've done the work here, now it's time to move on, I would be okay with that. And I think a person going into a secular situation like that needs to always have that attitude, that if God is leading you there, he may also lead you away from it, because there may come a time where he needs you somewhere else, or you continue. So I was fortunate in those cases where they liked me enough to want to put me on something else. And so I would say that if a Christian finds himself in that situation, speak up about it. Let your conscience, the Holy Spirit is impressing you, to speak out on it. You might be surprised at the reactions that you get.
I imagine you've had to have conversations like this with students. As animation students, there's not a lot of demand for animation in the Christian world. I can't say there's none, but there's not an enormous amount, and the default options are what Pixar and Disney and DreamWorks and these kinds of things. So do you find that you need to speak with young people and help them to understand some of the temptations or challenges that they might face?
Yes, one of the things that I really like to impress or try to impress on students here is the need to make God part of their artwork. The world will tell you that art is about self-expression. But really, we ourselves are an expression of God. He's created us in his image. And if his Spirit is working through us, then everything that we do becomes his expression. So artists are really intended to be God's expression through our hands as we're connected with him. And in various ways, I like to try to get that message through to students. But you never know what makes it in and what doesn't. So it really is encouraging when I hear stories of students who leave here and go somewhere else, and they work at a company where we've had this happen, where a company has wanted to do something that they felt bothered their conscience in terms of the content, and they spoke up about it. They told them about it, and the company, instead of firing them, changed the product. They rejected the contract for the original product and got something else because they liked the students that much. So again, you might be surprised if you are walking with God and he's working with you and through you, the reactions that you might get when you speak up on things.
Let me ask you this. So people will watch an old Disney cartoon or an old Disney film and they'll freeze frame it and say, look at that. And it might be something unsavory or unfortunate. So what is it? You were on the inside. Is it because the Disney Corporation is intentionally putting images every 17 and a half minutes to corrupt people's morals? Or I have a suspicion as to how it might be. I'm interested in what you would say. Or how do those images that occasionally get in there?
first of all, let me say there were things like that did make it into those films. And, people have pointed them out. But they were always done by one individual here or there who wanted to do something as a gag or as a practical joke in some way, and would kind of share it with their buddies and there at the studio. Look what I did and all. There was nothing that was ever mandated on the artist. In fact, when that was discovered, when I was there, when things like that were discovered and people were starting to talk about it, the executives called the entire department and sat us down. They said, we don't want to see anything like this in our films. If we catch anybody doing this kind of thing, you're not going to last around here. So it was never a corporate thing. Now, but I will say, as a secular studio with secular mind and worldview of things, they don't know God. And so when you remove God from anything, something else takes its place. So instead of miracles, you'll have magic. Instead of something that speaks to eternity, you have something that speaks to what we've evolved from. So something takes the place of God when you remove it. And in a secular environment where you don't have God, these things naturally come in. So as a Christian, you know this, you see it, and again, you have the opportunity when it arises to point some things out or to help influence, to guide this way or that way. You may not have all power to completely change something, but you may change somebody's life when you say something and it triggers something in their mind. Maybe down the future, they'll remember that and they'll want to look into it more and get introduced to God in some way.
Young guy living in Burbank, working in Burbank, raised in Glendale. The weather's perfect. Life is good. You've got your dream job. Was your dream job?
Yeah, it was.
All right.
Since I was 12, I wanted it.
All right. Your dream job since childhood. And you are working at one of the best known and most beloved companies on the entire planet. Yea, verily, in the history of the planet. And you quit to move 3,000 miles and take a job teaching at a small Christian school. You've got to tell us what in the world you were thinking, and he will. He's Hendel Butoy, Professor of Animation at Southern Adventist University. We have more questions for him in a moment on Conversations. It was a tragedy of unspeakable proportions. Shockingly, suddenly, unexpectedly, shots were fired, and people were left dead inside a church. How does a city respond to a crime of such hatred? How do individuals respond when people they love are snatched away by a madman's gun? Don't miss Radical Forgiveness. You'll meet pastor and author Anthony B. Thompson, who recounts his harrowing journey from loss to forgiveness. The love of God demonstrated in a remarkable way. Radical Forgiveness takes you inside a deeply personal tragedy and shows what God can do in a person's life. Don't miss Radical Forgiveness on It Is Written TV.
Planning for your financial future is a vital aspect of Christian stewardship. For this reason, It Is Written is pleased to offer free planned giving and estate services. For information on how we can help you, please call 800-992-2219. Call today or visit our website, hislegacy.com. Call 800-992-2219.
Today on Conversations, my guest is Hendel Butoy, a professor at Southern Adventist University in Collegedale, Tennessee, teaches animation. Hendel, you worked at Disney for a number of years, drawing. Animation didn't stay, it fell out of love with the pencil and kind of fell for the computer. You, I imagine, had to transition through that. What was that like?
It was great, but it wasn't easy because the computer is a different machine. Actually, we like to talk about the computer as being a more expensive pencil because you still have to learn how to manipulate it, but it's manipulating something different than a pencil. So
Seems to me like that'd be a bit like going from drawing to sculpting almost. Is it that radical a change?
To a degree, because when you're doing something 2D, you're having to think three-dimensionally. But now you actually got the 3 dimensions that when you do something on one side, you have to make sure it's right on the other side as well and kind of turn it around. And then not only that, then it has to move properly in different angles also. So it was a bit of a challenge just learning the whole medium of computer.
Well, you survived the transition, but I'm wondering if there were artists who did not survive the transition.
Well, there were. The artists that didn't survive the transition are basically the ones who never wanted to let go of their pencils. The writing was on the wall that this was coming because a picture had been made that was very well received and it was very well done, and so this was the direction of things. But there were some artists who were saying, "No, we love our pencils and this is where we're going to stay," and the technology moved on without them. The jobs became less and less for pencil work and more for computer work. And those that hung on to their pencils were left behind, so to speak.
So things have changed dramatically since you were a 12-year-old wanting to become an animator one day. What do you see today? What are examples of animation today that make you say, wow, that's really well done?
There's a lot of great animation being done today. It's really pretty impressive. When I was a student and when I was just starting out, it was very few and far between. Very few places were doing it. And they would just come out every once in a while. But it seems like today, the understanding of the principles and of storytelling, all these are important things that people are able to grasp it sooner because of the information age. This is all readily available to everybody and therefore do more with it. So there's a lot of really good animation out there in terms of how things move and how they tell stories. I don't particularly like the content of everything that I see and would like to see things that have more eternal and spiritual based things under them. But in terms of the quality and level of that, it's pretty high now. You can go anywhere to find it.
Now, my guess is you'd love to see more animation incorporated into Christianity and using that to tell the Christian story like you dreamed of when you were looking at the Uncle Arthur's books as a kid. So how does that happen? What's it going to take, or how can animators blend their talent, professional talent, with their love for God? We don't see much of it. What's it going to take? How can it happen?
Well, the love for God comes first. And if you've got that, your art is just an extension of that love for God. And you'll want to do anything that you can to express what God is telling you. Animation is a very expensive art medium, even with the computers. When they first brought in computers into animation, they thought, oh, this is going to solve all our financial problems because it can be done just like that. And people still have this misconception that all you got to do with the computer is push a button and it does it for you. But the computer is not a human being, and therefore you have to tell it things that it doesn't know. And so there's a whole learning process there in order to be able to learn it. Therefore, it still requires a lot of people and a lot of time. And this is what makes animation expensive. And so to do something on a high quality feature type thing would take an enormous amount of investment and people to believe in it to make it happen. But artists and Christian artists can still do smaller projects that can still, in a very short amount of time, still deliver powerful things. And there's samples that you can find with this that some Christians have done online that you can see. And it's just, first of all, having that walk with God, having that experience with Him, and then wanting to share that. Because a Christian can't but share the good news. And so they look for ways to do it.
So there you were in Southern California living the dream. But today you're living in Eastern Tennessee teaching animation at a Christian school. That was not the original vision. I think this question is really significant because there are a lot of people who achieve and experience terrific success in their chosen field. They make it a long way on that professional road. Then they're called. They're called to ministry. They're called to teaching. It's a wrestling. So explain to me how that went on with you, and I want to hear how you managed to cross that bridge. You were able to look at Disney in the rear view mirror of your car and leave that all behind to teach.
Yeah, many times I have students ask me the same question because that's where they're trying to get to, and they ask, why'd you leave all that? So before I ever got to Disney, while I was still at Cal Arts, I was praying and asking, Lord, would you have me in this industry? And if you will, I'll continue to walk in it, and please be with me. But if you don't want me in this industry, let me know. Close the door, shut me out of something. And I had that attitude before ever coming into Disney. And so when I actually got in, I felt as if God was leading, and I felt it was a privilege for me to be there, and I couldn't take that for granted. And so I continued to make it a point and to keep that same attitude. Lord, at the end of every project, do you want me to continue? This was a constant prayer I had at the end of every project. One day a call came for something different. A dean of the school of here at the School of Visual Art and Design, I don't know how he got my number because artists don't give their numbers out in the studio, in their offices, but somehow he found it and called me and said, we're an Adventist Christian school out here in Tennessee. We're just starting an animation program. Would you come out and just talk to the students? Just give a lecture of what it's like to be a Christian, an Adventist Christian, in a place like this. And just so they have that perspective. I said, sure, I'll come out just to do that. Not thinking anything else about it. I'd been asked to do that kind of thing before, but never at a Christian college. And so I came out to Southern here and did that. And then they called me again the next year and would nudge me a little bit more, like, is there more that you can do for us? And I continued to get calls until the question was finally popped. Would you consider, we're just fresh, brand new starting, but we don't have any professional professors out here who are Adventist Christians. Would you consider coming out here and helping us out with that? I recognize that as something completely different. And I thought, well, here I've been praying all this time. Is it coming now? After talking with my wife and hearing that God was speaking to her also that this is a move we should make, we made that choice and we came out here. So what I tell my students when they ask me that question, how'd you get out here? How did it happen? I say prayer. Prayer is the reason that I'm here.
What do you enjoy about teaching?
What I enjoy about teaching is that I get to see the influence of getting to know God with my students face to face, as opposed to doing something where an audience is going to see the work that I do, but I never get to really see them in a tangible way to know what kind of influence I'm having. With students, I can see tangibly what's going on. I enjoy that.
So a kid is thinking, I've got this idea, I would like to be an animator, and there are only so many opportunities. I'm very spiritually inclined. I want to serve God. I'm not quite sure where the future is going. Speak to that young person now. They're thinking of coming to Southern and doing arts or animation or something like that. How do they weigh it up and make that decision if there's a Christian future for them in this?
First of all, put God first in everything and decide that if you're going to go down this route, that everything that you're going to do has Him involved with it. And then seek to improve yourself in whatever that is. If it's drawing or if it's understanding movement, find ways to improve yourself on that. If before you enter school, find ways to draw well or to learn about the computer. And
official numbers suggest that yoga is practiced by tens of millions of Americans and then by millions more around the world. Its roots are in India, but in spite of that, yoga has been embraced even by Christians. My guest was born and raised in India and has done extensive study into the roots and the philosophy of yoga. His name is Ivan Raj. I'm John Bradshaw, and this is Our Conversation. Ivan, great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Pastor.
I am thrilled to be able to talk to somebody who's done a great amount of study and research into yoga and its roots and its meaning and its effectiveness and so on. We'll get to that in just a moment. Let's start talking about you
Sure.
for a minute. You're a Christian believer today. You weren't raised in this country or in any Western nation. You were raised in India. So
Yes.
where are you from?
So I'm from Chennai. I was born and raised in Chennai.
Now you got to explain to us where Chennai is.
So Chennai is located in the southeast part of India.
Okay.
It is the capital of a state called Tamil Nadu.
All right. So you were born and raised in India. What was your religious background like? The overwhelming majority of Indians are Hindu, but in your case?
So I was raised in a Christian family. My mom's side, her parents were raised by Lutheran missionaries from Germany. So we've been Christians through like 3 or 4 generations. And my mom was church hopping at that time, looking for the truth. And then we discovered the Adventist faith in 1993.
Now, I'm interested. I didn't even know that I've ever asked an Indian friend this. What's it like to be a Christian in India? Now, I know that might vary from place to place because in some places there's a lot of hostility towards Christians, but you're clearly the odd one out as a Christian and not a Hindu in India. How does that play out in practical terms for someone growing up in India?
Generally, Christians are respected in India. There are pockets and places and certain places in India where Christianity is not good and Christians are not treated well. But for the most part, Christians are favored.
So did you attend a Christian school or public school?
I attended a Hindu school.
Oh, right, so explain that to me.
Yeah.
So Christians are respected, you were saying. So in the South, there's tolerance towards Christians.
Yeah.
But still, how's that being, maybe the only Christian in your class or in your friend group? Was that tense or difficult? Was it complicated? How was that?
Not really. There was no tension as such. There was no complications. I still have all my friends. I still communicate with them. Most of them are Hindus. And many of them are also Muslims as well. So generally, if we are nice to people, people are nice to us. That's what I've noticed growing up in India. And especially Christians, the Hindus, they actually love Jesus Christ. They love Christ. They love the message of Christ. And they love that Christians don't involve in quarrels and discriminations and things like that. So therefore, because in Hinduism there's a lot of issues with regards to caste system, discrimination based on that. Whereas in Christianity, all of us are made in the image of God. So that actually helps to win favors with Hinduism. Yeah,
Let's talk about the caste system for a minute. I want you to explain that to me. And what I found really interesting, I read an in-depth article recently talking about how the caste system can follow Indians around the world.
Yes.
People working in Silicon Valley, when it is discovered that you are from a certain caste, it's over. You will never get promoted. I'm saying in certain places, this is not accepted, but it's deeply ingrained. Talk about what that caste system is, how it works back home in India.
Sure. So caste system, basically there are 3 main deities in Hinduism: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So according to Hinduism, the priest class, skin color also is like light skin. They came out of the Brahma's forehead. And then the warrior class and the kings and the queens, they came out of his chest. So the people who do the labor work, such as, let's say, cleaning the toilets, a cobbler or a hairstylist, these people came out of the feet of that particular god.
And that means that they are bound to be in that strata in perpetuity.
Yes.
So the person from the caste, the lower caste, can become a doctor?
They can become a doctor, but still, even till today, people look down upon such people.
Oh, so even a doctor from a lower caste is looked down on?
Yeah.
So what you're saying, though, even if you're born in a low caste, there is upward mobility. That's possible.
Yeah.
But difficult, right?
Difficult, yes. Difficult.
Because you're discriminated against.
Yes.
You apply for a job, you are from a certain caste.
Yes.
You are not getting the job.
Yes, exactly. Because in the In the application form, they will ask, what is your caste?
Oh, they ask that
will
out
ask
front.
that. Yes.
You know, in the United States, we would not be allowed to ask that question.
Yeah, but in India, they ask that question.
That's a brutal system.
Yeah.
It just strikes me as really interesting that something so patently racist
Yeah.
and discriminatory
Yeah.
can exist in such a large democratic country.
Yeah.
And it's tolerated. I mean, the rest of the world, no one from around the world sanctions India because they discriminate against people at the bottom of the bottom rung of the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they should. It's just a fascinating dynamic. But anyway, you came to the United States as a young man, as a teenager?
No, around a decade ago, I worked for an IT company. I used to work in Santa Clara in California.
Uh-huh.
And then I moved to the East Coast, and God opened up the opportunity for me to work at a Jewish place into sales and marketing.
Yes.
So that's where I actually developed a personal relationship with Christ in New York City.
I don't know that too many people can say that. Okay, I say that flippantly.
Sure.
So you're working in IT. Now you're fully involved and immersed in working in Christian ministry.
Yeah.
My guess is that IT pays better than Christian ministry.
Absolutely.
So tell me about how that transition came about and how you were able to make that decision to change your lifestyle, your income, and go all in with God. How did it happen?
Wow, okay. So in New York City, there were a lot of challenges, financial challenges as well. Nonetheless, before I quit my IT job, I was a nominal Christian. And after my mom passed away, I realized that I needed someone in my life to guide me. And I did not find any human at that time. So I did some research on other religions, on Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. And I found that Bible made perfect sense. And every angle I tested it made perfect sense.
It's interesting to me that a Christian from India would study Hinduism. You were studying to see whether that's where the truth and the light was?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you found, what convinced you about the Bible?
Because when I read the text in the Bible, I felt like the presence of God, like it was special to me. When you read other religious books, it was a story. You're reading a story.
Yes.
And also they were very confusing as well.
And then you dived into Christian ministry. How did that opportunity come, and what sort of courage did it take to take that step?
Sure. So I came across this text in Isaiah where God asks Isaiah, who will go for us?
Yes.
And Isaiah said, here am I, send me. So I felt like I should say the same answer. I felt like God is asking me that question, who will go for us? So I signed up. When I signed up, I resigned from my IT job.
Yeah.
And then different turn of events, I felt impressed to start a carob business. While I was, at that time I was actually into sales, working for a Jewish place. I was the only Sabbath keeper. The owners were not Sabbath keepers.
Even though they were Jewish?
Yeah, they were not. So when I asked them for Sabbath off, like when I was being interviewed, I asked them, I need Sabbath off. Can you grant it? So the interviewer leaned to the front and he said, are you Jewish? I said, no. Why are you so stuck on Shabbat? And then he said, okay, I respect that. We respect that. We'll give you Sabbath off. But you should come to work on Sundays. I said, sure, I'll work on Sundays.
So carob business.
Yeah.
Explain what carob is. I mean, I know carob. I like carob.
Yeah.
Me and carob are old friends. But someone's going, did he say
Sure.
carrot business?
Carob.
Explain carob.
So after my stint at this Jewish place, this company, after that, God put in my heart. When I say God, I really felt very strongly to start a carob business, a carob truffle business. When I passed a chocolate store, it had beautiful chocolates, but there were not many people there. So that image stuck in my mind, and I thought, okay, I have to start making carob truffles. But at that time, I did not know how to make them, nor to cook anything at that time. So I sent a text to my friend Heidi Tompkins, asking if she knows anybody who can make carob truffles. At that time, she was also looking for opportunities, and she was a Bible worker, and you know her well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And she replied, yes, me. So then we got together and God gave the business plan. When I fasted and prayed, God gave me the name and the logo, everything. So that's how it started as Heidi's Health Kitchen in 2014.
Yeah, fantastic. And now you have we're going to talk to Heidi one of these days and ask her to tell what I think is a very exciting story. So now you're immersed in Christian ministry.
Yeah.
Now, let's transition over to your latest project. I know you've been very active. You're based in New York City.
Yeah.
Health fairs, all sorts of outreach and working for the benefit of the communities in which you live and work. But recently, you've made it your study to dig into yoga and its roots and its philosophy and its meaning.
Yeah.
Yoga today is very popular. And what's fascinating is it's become popular even among some Christians. Explain what yoga is. Just on the surface, we'll dig deeper, but on the surface, what is yoga?
Sure. Yoga is a Hindu ritual. The word yoga means to marry, to connect, to unite, to combine, to become one with. That's what yoga means, to yoke with.
Mm-hmm. Now, most people thinking of yoga would say stretching and strange positions and maybe contortions with your arms and legs and hands outstretched and so forth. What is it about yoga as you've studied it that makes it attractive to Westerners? I'm not asking about Christians, that's my next question.
Sure.
Why has yoga attracted the attention of people in the West? It came from the East. Why has it taken off here?
So, quick answer. Quick results, actually. People do lose weight. People do get benefits health-wise, mentally and physically, initially.
Sure.
So what happens is, when that person starts a yoga studio and teaches that, the students also get quick results. So that means the person makes quick money. It's a lot of money involved in it. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry now in the West.
Yeah.
So that is what the attraction is regarding yoga, because it does help a person to get flexible.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about the benefits of yoga.
Yeah.
Stretching.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest this. It's not just the physical movements that one does.
Correct.
Because to stretch and to be limber has got to be good.
Yeah.
There's relaxation.
Yeah.
There is clearing the mind.
Yes.
Even just the idea of taking the time to dedicate to yoga. You're squeezing other useless things out of your life. You're telling your whole life, I do this. I'm health conscious. I'm oriented to do something for the good of myself. A lot of benefits, yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. So on the surface, we would say benefits. On the surface, we would say benefits. Now, why do you think it's become attractive to Christians? Let's keep in mind, this is a Hindu practice. Why have Christians cottoned onto this?
Yeah, because what some organizations have done is they have Christianized this Hindu ritual and they have branded it as holy yoga, Christian yoga, one. Number two is instead of the chants, they say read Psalms.
Yeah.
Say for example, Psalm 23 as you're stretching, or recite or just share the certain stories like incidents from Jonah. Talk about that as you're stretching with your kids. So the kids will learn Bible and also stretching at the same time.
Okay.
So
now what I know is that before we're done, you were going to tell me that Christianity and the activities of yoga are incompatible.
Correct.
I know you're going to tell me that. But we're going to talk about the why that's incompatible, and we may even come back to that a little later on. So it's taken off like wildfire. You'll see churches advertising, come here for yoga class. I've mentioned that yoga is Hindu. See, here's what I've seen in the news. Hindu leaders in India angry with the West, saying, why are you taking our Hindu practice and calling it Western?
yes,
Why are you taking our Hindu practice and calling it Christian? One might want to call this cultural appropriation. Why do Hindu leaders, some of them, now you have the current Prime Minister of India who's a Hindu priest, he's very happy to spread the gospel of yoga, but we'll get back to that later. Why are some Hindus upset that the West is taking yoga and practicing yoga? Why would they be bothered?
Yeah, because first of all, in India, yoga was not big at all. Only very few Hindu schools, like I studied in a Hindu school for some years. And I used to do yoga because I was taught yoga. So only very few Hindu schools were teaching yoga at that time. And they know Indians or Hindus noticed that, these guys are making a lot of money off our ritual. So that's one. Number two is many people have modified the objective of yoga and commercialized it. So that also is not something that people like in India.
I think another reason they do this, Ivan, is because they know it's a religious practice.
Yes.
And you are doing our religious practice for your own end without respect to the religion.
Correct. Exactly.
I think one of the questions that everyone's asking is, well, can't you just do it and not do the religion part? So I want to ask you that. So we're going to do yoga. Come to my church basement. We'll do a bunch of yoga. Well, we're just stretching. We're just stretching and we're having a happy time together. Mm-hmm. Well, where's the harm in that?
Sure. So yoga stretches are not just regular stretches. The stretch in yoga, each stretch has a meaning to it. So for example, there's a pose called warrior pose. Warrior 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So in the warrior pose, the person stretches in certain angles. What they're doing is basically they are doing the act of beheading, which happens in Hindu mythology. That's one example.
Okay.
And also, basically, yoga is sun worship. So the stretches have meaning, and the stretches have to be done in a certain sequence. You can't change the sequence. They have to be done in a certain sequential order in order to play out the Hindu story or the Hindu mythology. Not only in Hinduism, if you take Islam, in Islam also there is stretching.
Okay.
Physical expression of worship. So yoga stretching is a Hindu ritual. It is a physical expression of worship. You can never separate. You can never separate yoga from Hinduism. It's not possible.
Because yoga is Hinduism.
It is Hinduism.
Who says so, Ivan? Is that you saying so? Or are there others who say that same thing?
There are people who say the same thing, that yoga cannot be, it is rooted in Hinduism.
What kind of people say this?
The gurus, the yoga gurus say that in India. Indian yoga gurus, very popular gurus say that.
Okay. So yoga leaders will tell you you can't separate yoga and Hinduism.
You can't separate, yeah.
So which means then that whether they intend to or otherwise, you've got Christians practicing Eastern mysticism,
Yeah.
what we would call Hindu worship. They may say what they want,
Yeah.
but ultimately that's what they're participating in.
Correct.
Okay. There's a lot to cover. We're just beginning. We're scratching the
Yeah.
surface. I want to talk to you about the philosophy of yoga,
Sure.
where it came from, who were some of the figures involved in
Sure.
yoga at the earliest times. His name is Ivan Raj. I'm John Bradshaw. This is Conversations brought to you by It Is Written, and we will be back with more in just a moment. It was 1882 in western North Carolina when 19 men and boys drowned in the Tuckasegee River in what was a terrible accident. It was an accident that should never have happened. In post-slavery America, the men, like so many others, had been leased to the state as cheap labor. Convict leasing existed in the United States for decades. The practice calling into question our notions of freedom. Don't miss Free Indeed, filmed on location in North Carolina. As we look into the subject of freedom and ask the question, are you really free? Find out where true freedom can be found and learn that you don't have to be a slave to the old life. Watch Free Indeed on It Is Written TV.
Hello, I'm Dr. Wes Youngberg, and I've just written a book called Memory Makeover, How to Prevent Alzheimer's and Reverse Cognitive Decline. This book is in story form. It's case studies of individuals that I've worked with and my colleagues I've worked with where they've actually been able to stop cognitive decline, and 80% of the time have been able to reverse aspects of cognitive decline. If you want to know more about that, get the book, Memory Makeover.
Welcome back to Conversations, brought to you by It Is Written. I'm John Bradshaw. My guest is Ivan Raj, who is the producer of a series called Yoga Unboxed. What we're going to discuss here, I think, is fairly in-depth, but if you want real in-depth, I would encourage you to watch what is now a 5-part series with more parts being added. The intent is to stretch this out to a 17-part series on yoga, so you can watch or support the work of Ivan in this field by going to yogaunboxed.com, and when you get there, you'll know what to do. Ivan, let's talk about the philosophical underpinnings of yoga. Where did it come from? Who were the movers and shakers? How did it get started? How did it develop? Let's talk about that.
So as I mentioned, yoga means to unite. And so then we have to ask a question, unite with whom?
Exactly.
With what? So yoga is to unite with the source of yoga. Then we have to ask a question, who is the source of yoga?
That's right.
I mentioned there are 3 main deities in Hinduism, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, right? So the word Shiva means that which is not. That which is not. It's not, that's what they say. So they also say he is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. He's also called as the universe. A lot of people in the West say, the universe helped me, I'm going to talk to the universe.
Sure.
That is Shiva. Most of the Shiva temples are built facing south, all over the world. So the Shiva devotees have to worship Shiva facing the sides of the north.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. And he always, not always, in some of his forms, one of his forms actually, he has a serpent around his neck. And he carries a trident or pitchfork, and on it is a tabret, a drum. And to mesmerize a serpent, there's a pipe. The snake charmers use a pipe. So pipe and timbrel are part of his instruments. And he's also called in a Sanskrit language, the ancient Indian language, as Ardha Narishwara, which means half male and half woman. So androgynous.
Yeah.
He's also depicted as an androgynous god. And there are also images of him in a Nataraja form. He's the lord of the dance. He's the lord of acting. He's the lord of music, according to Hinduism.
So make the connection here between Shiva and yoga.
Yeah. So when a person practices yoga, eventually their mind will be drawn towards Shiva. They'll connect with the universe, which is Shiva.
That's the point, huh?
That's the point of it, yes. And you become one, or the person, the practitioner becomes one with Shiva. When it happens, then the person loses their identity. The I is erased. Now, what I'm saying is not just from my mouth. All major yoga gurus teach that I am not my body, I am not my mind. So that means I don't know if I'm a male or a female. I don't know who I am anymore, because I'm one with the universe. I'm mixed up with the universe, Shiva.
Now, if someone were to roll into a yoga class, a yoga class, not something that some dear lady at the local church is doing in the church basement. If you were to sign up for real yoga, whatever that means, as real as it can be, the instructor would tell you, okay, the reason you are here is what you are going to experience is. What will they tell you?
They will say that you will experience peace of mind after this. You'll be relaxed. And people will be relaxed.
Sure.
It does happen. But what happens is, after they come out of that yoga studio, again their regular mindset comes back.
Sure.
So the person has to go back over and over and over to get that type of relaxation. And what happens is, so the frontal lobe is gets shut eventually. So the person will say, come, you're going to get relaxation. And people will experience deep sleep, relaxed, the body will be very relaxed and calm. Those things will happen. So that's what people use as a pitch to invite attendees.
Philosophically, what's the intent? I'm the yoga guru, you're my student. My intent from a philosophical or religious perspective, I'm to impart what, or what's the point of this?
Two things. Aham Brahmasmi, I am God. Second, I will not surely die.
Who says that?
That is the purpose of yoga.
Explain that, because everybody who walks into a yoga studio knows they're going to die. So what's that philosophy?
Yeah. So they teach reincarnation.
Yeah, sure.
So what they say is, when a person keeps on doing this practice, eventually they will not be they will not die. They will not surely die. They are going to become divine. So the purpose of yoga is to extract the divinity that is within the human. At least that's what the teaching is.
Yeah. So that's the purpose of yoga, to connect the human with the divine and to bring out the divine in you.
Yes.
You are God.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's very interesting. But someone's screaming at the TV screen right now. They're saying, but that's not what we do. That's not what we do at church. We don't do that. Why should anybody be bothered or care or object to the idea of a yoga class taking place at church?
Sure. Bible tells us the author and finisher of our faith is Jesus Christ. So who is the author of yoga? Not Jesus Christ. So if, as a Christian, I continue and pursue teaching or learning yoga or practicing yoga, that means I'm saying that Christ is not adequate for me.
But Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Lee or Mrs. Washington or somebody is saying, but I'm not saying that. But I'm not saying that. They're doing it, but they're not saying that. Is that a legitimate approach?
No, because yoga stretches are rooted in. So there are 6 schools in Hindu philosophy.
Okay.
Out of the 6 schools, one school is called Samkhya, which means numbers, and it is a theory part. And the other one is yoga. It is the practical part of Samkhya, which is from Hinduism.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that yoga doesn't exist in a vacuum.
No.
It's the practical part of a certain philosophy.
Yes, Hindu philosophy.
Explain that.
Yeah. So there are magic, like how to make magic potions and how to make natural remedies. Those are all different philosophies in Hinduism. Like Ayurveda, for example.
Sure.
Ayurveda is rooted in Hinduism. Martial arts is rooted in Hinduism. So anything that comes from the East is rooted in Hinduism from India. Anything that comes from the East, whether China, Japan, Korea, doesn't matter. They all, for example, if you take Reiki, the founder of Reiki was a Japanese man, professor, I believe, and he was a Buddhist. And Buddha was Indian.
Yeah.
Buddhism is from India. So all of these have roots in Hinduism, all the Eastern religions. And all of these religions have these 2 concepts: you will not surely die, you are divine.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. That look, it mystifies me that a Christian would want to. I mean, I get it. You want to get together with your girlfriends or your boyfriends, whatever they might be, with your friends, and stretch and have a happy time, and it's time to get together. I keep talking about the church basement, and that's all good. But this isn't Christian.
This is not.
Talk to me about some of the key figures in yoga over the years, what they stood for, what they taught.
Yeah, so the first man that actually brought yoga into the United States, his name was Swami Vivekananda. But actually, before all of that, I also want to mention about the serpent that is around the neck of Shiva.
Yeah.
So according to Hindu philosophy, the source of yoga is Shiva. but the main guru or the founder also, some people say father, some people say, is the serpent. And the serpent, according to Hindu teachings, mythology, serpent took the form of a human being. And he wrote 195 aphorisms, means wise sayings. Mm-hmm. So all of yoga will fit into that 195 wise sayings that supposedly this wise serpent wrote. And that is the foundation of all yoga practice. So if I'm a Christian and I'm reciting, let's say, Psalm 23 or Psalm 91, and I keep doing yoga stretches, then the stretches, I'm attributing it to serpent and the source Shiva. But verbally, I'm just lip service, I'm just reciting the Bible texts. So it's a mingling of Christianity and Hinduism in one. So Christ doesn't want that to happen. Christ tells us to yoke with Him, to unite with Him.
As you were doing the study, and if you get to 17 parts, that means there's an enormous amount of information here. Was there something that surprised you along the way? You said this was mind-blowing or unexpected as you studied about
So
yoga.
According to Hinduism, the origins of yoga is actually found in the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, verse 1 to 7.
According to Hinduism?
Yeah, in Hinduism, the mythology says that Shiva taught yoga to a woman. A woman was the first yoga student.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And the teachings are, you will not die, you will be like gods.
So there's some very, very strong parallels, at least in the minds of the Hindus and the yoga practitioners. Mm-hmm. They are convinced this is worship, and this is inextricably linked with Hindu deities.
Yes.
There's no way around that.
There's no way around that. No way. No way. Also, on a different note, yoga stretching, like the limbs, the way the postures are, the human body is not designed to do such things.
Sure.
So I have friends who are fitness trainers, and they tell me that when people keep on practicing yoga and the yoga postures, eventually they're going to have a lot of physical issues. And people do have physical issues first as they keep doing yoga postures.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I know there's a lot to learn, and I think this is a really very important subject, because when Hinduism marches into the front door of the Christian church and sets up camp, I don't know that anybody could believe that that's benign in any way. We'll cover this more in just a moment. With Ivan Raj, I'm John Bradshaw. We'll be back with more from our conversation in just a moment. Thank you for remembering that It Is Written exists because of the kindness of people just like you. To support this international life-changing ministry, please call us now at 800-253-3000. You can send your tax-deductible gift to the address on your screen, or you can visit us online at itiswritten.com. Thank you for your prayers and for your financial support. Our number again is 800-253-3000, or you can visit us online at itiswritten.com. The clock ticks persistently. Every 60 seconds, another minute passes. Every 24 hours, another day. Every 365 days, another year is consigned to history. Life is governed by time. From the alarm clock that wakes you in the morning to the bell that rings to announce the end of class, there's no escaping the relentless march of time. Given that our time on this earth is limited, how can we best use our time? How can we spend our time in a way that encourages spiritual growth and draws us closer to the heart of God? Don't miss Time Well Spent. Learn how God intends time to work for you, to be your ally as you prepare for eternity. How do you find time for the things that you really want to do? And how do you find time for God? Time Well Spent. Brought to you by It Is Written TV. Welcome back to Conversations, brought to you by It Is Written. My guest is Ivan Raj. To see his work, his in-depth study on yoga, I would encourage you to visit yogaunboxed.com. You can watch the programs, you can support the work, and you'll get an education into yoga like you might not have even thought possible. Ivan, a few moments ago we were talking about the key players in yoga, speaking about the origins of yoga, who delivered this to following generations. Tell me what you can about that.
Yes. So there was this gentleman named Swami Vivekananda, who was a guru in India. And he was invited by some American religious leaders. So he came from India to the US in late 1800s. And he was also part of this Freemasonry as well. So he was the first promoter of yoga in the US. And after that, there were a couple of others also who came. But each person who came to the US were instructed by Shiva personally to take yoga to the US.
Shiva, we're talking about a god Shiva.
Yeah, he appeared in different forms to different Hindu gurus.
So why do you think it was important to Shiva or to the powers of darkness to have yoga intentionally brought to the United States?
So the way I look at it is, we have 8 laws of health established by God at creation. Hinduism, in yoga, there are 8 limbs of yoga. So instead of a person in a Christian country subscribing to these 8 laws of health which God established, so there's another option that is given to people, and it is heavily funded, and people make a lot of money having a yoga studio or teaching yoga. So one by one, each of these yoga gurus were brought or sent from India to the United States to teach yoga. So that, and what they did was, these yoga gurus also wore crosses, a crucifix. So a Westerner, oh look, he's wearing a crucifix and he's talking about Jesus Christ. They did talk about Jesus Christ. They did write about Jesus Christ in their books. However, the Jesus mentioned in their books is not the Christ in the Bible.
What's the difference?
The difference is, this Jesus that they talk about does not subscribe to the 10 Commandments.
Oh.
The Christ, as per the Bible, the Creator, the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, He told us to fulfill, that He has fulfilled the law. And He told us to keep His commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments, right? So that doesn't exist with this Jesus.
Okay. So I'd expect that many people would be surprised to know, some might even dispute the claim. I don't know how, because Hindus make the claim themselves.
Yes.
Surprised to know that yoga is a religious practice and is an expression of worship. Worship of who? And I'm saying this, I don't mean the underpinnings, but the yoga teachers, or the theory would say this is worship of who exactly?
Yeah, Shiva.
Of Shiva.
Shiva. So there are certain Hindu writings which state that all of the gods are actually Shiva. Sun is Shiva. Lucy, or light, sun is also Shiva. So people say sun salutation. It's a common term in the West these days. Sun salutation. So a Westerner would not know that is actually sun worship. The actual words for sun salutation in Sanskrit is Surya Namaskara. Surya means sun. Namaskara means worship. So
go ahead.
Yeah, but they instead of saying sun worship, they relabeled it or renamed it as salutation, so it'll be more palatable to the West.
Yeah.
To the Christians.
It interests me that Westerners seem to be so vulnerable to Indian philosophies. For example, you go back to the 60s and the Beatles made a pilgrimage to India to talk to Hindu leaders. Why in the world India? There's a fascination with things Indian. I saw recently a fellow in